What's up, Yellowjackets fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, and I am here with my good friend, Mr. Dr. Zayas God, based on a book by Stephen King, Danny Torkel. Danny, would this episode of Yellowjackets, episode 7 of season 2, would that have anything to do with Stephen King this week?
Uh, Potentially. Potentially. But just overall, my sister and I were talking about this last night. This might have been my all-time favorite episode of Yellowjackets.
Ooh.
Uh-oh. Uh, I there were several parts. I was gonna say, "Here I am, live like lightning crashes." Uh, I said to my sister, I really hope that this episode of Yellowjackets does for Lightning Crashes what Stranger Things did for Kate Bush and Running Up That Hill,
Right.
because that's an all time great '90s song, and I was that whole sequence towards the end was friggin' awesome.
Yes.
I want to ask you because we didn't mention this last week because I didn't see it last week when they were doing the recap from last week. Did you notice that after the six of them, right? The six of them see each other at the compound as Lottie starts walking, they do this overhead shot.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice that the outline of the symbol.
The symbol. I didn't say it in our review.
I don't know if we pointed that out, but I felt really like stupid for having missed that. I guess I was just so into like the whole like music rising and like the characters seeing each other that I didn't notice it until I just saw the recap and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, no, I did see that the first time around, and I thought I mentioned it last week too, but I mean, maybe I didn't. There's a lot to talk about every episode, but like this episode, this discussion today, we're probably gonna have one of those Siskel and Ebert moments because you're saying this is your favorite of the whole series.
It's absolutely my favorite of this season.
Okay.
With maybe, I mean, the only episode this season, and I've liked this season, but to me, the only episode that really felt like epic was when they chowed down on Jackie.
Yeah.
This to me was, this episode did things that I could totally see where some people wouldn't like. I think there's one specific moment in particular. But I love the character moments in this.
Right.
I think also what I loved about this episode is my biggest issue for season 2, especially, has been that a lot of the present day stories haven't really been as exciting as the past stories. Now that they're all at the compound, we don't have to, we didn't spend any time with Jeff and Callie and the police station. We didn't spend any time with Misty and Walter driving around. We didn't spend any time with Thaisa making small talk with Van in a record store or a video store. Everybody was together. All of the 2021 stories felt like they mattered because they're all kind of, it's all together.
Right.
And I thought that the stuff from the past was great. The musical choices, the directorial choices, I really liked. So I don't know. This episode just hit a little different for me.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I get worried about when I make these kind of recordings in general, right, is I worry that I get like too nitpicky or kind of too cynical. My wife and my brother-in-law are very, I think I've even mentioned this before. Like they kind of like point out like, oh, we've seen this in another show before. We've seen this in a movie, and they get real critical. And I'm like, oh, come on, like let's appreciate this. Let's appreciate that. And for me, this season of Yellowjackets in general, like if we were going by a grade of like 1 to 10 per episode per season, I'd say that season 1 had episodes that were mainly 8.5 to 10.
8 and above.
8 and above, right? For this season, I would say maybe
6.5 and above.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, yeah, it was hard kind of to put that into words. Yeah, and like I feel like the highlights of this season so far have been Jackie's, where they all eat Jackie, and then also when Shauna
de la Jackie.
Yes, and when Shauna realized that she didn't have the baby. I mean, I'm saying it's a highlight, but it's this fucking super depressing low point. But it was like just well done.
As a viewer, I agree with you. Those are probably the two last week's episode and the Jackie episode to me were the two best of the season.
Correct. And now we're 7 episodes in, and this episode, I mean, see, that's I like that you're giving praise and stuff. I don't want to be like, oh, well, I think it's stupid, but like this episode, I really did feel like there was only one good scene, and I feel like it was the scene where the coach was going to jump off the cliff, and then Misty tried like everything in her toolbox to try to get him to not jump. I thought that was a really good scene.
I love that moment. I thought that Samantha Hanratty is so freaking good.
Yeah.
And like we always talk about how her and Christina Ricci are like literally two sides of the same coin. And but she really, these last 2 episodes, has shined so brightly with the way she handled having to basically be the midwife, like the de facto midwife of Shauna's baby. And then this week with that scene at the cliff. And also just like the scenes where the girls are talking behind her and they're like, at first they're like, thank God Misty was there to like help with the baby. And she's like, oh, awesome. They like me. And they're like, yeah, because she's a fucking lunatic. And she's like,
yeah.
And then like that ties into Christina Ricci where Sean is like, everything you do, you treat everything like you're a serial killer. And Misty's like, why is that a bad thing?
You're right. Well, like, you know what? That brings up a good point, right? Because those scenes are really good. Anytime that there's like sort of allusion to them being cannibals, I really like that. Like when there's 2 scenes where the other girls, like sort of the cannon fodder girls, the girl with the pink hat and stuff, where they're kind of talking about cannibalism. One is when they're talking about how, what's the name of the girl that fell off the cliff? The one, Misty's friend.
Crystal the Pistol, whose real name was Kristen, but she didn't have a good nickname for Kristen.
Right. So they're talking about her and they're like, oh, maybe she did die. And then maybe we could eat her. Right. So there's that. Then with the coach, they talk about like how,
we'll eat you.
Right. Exactly. So like the fact that they're admitting that they're going to turn cannibalistic, that's really interesting stuff. What I was saying to Sherry last night, because Sherry kind of is on the same page with me too, is that in that first season, there was much more of a sense of doom in the past and in the present. I understand their situation is screwed in the past, but you felt it more. It was like more tangible. It's like, oh, this is scary. There's some weird shit going to happen. And in the present day, it felt like that too. And there's a sort of musical cue that this show does a lot where it's a bunch of voices and they kind of go like, ah, like when it's like there's this weird thing that you're seeing where you're like, what the fuck am I watching? Or like, oh, this is bad. It goes, ah. There's a lot more of that in season 1.
I want you to know you've officially ruined it for me now, because next week when I watch Yellowjackets, that cue is going to come on, and I'm just going to picture you going, oh.
Hopefully I have a shirt on while you're picturing it. But anyway, like, oh God, the symbol, it's on his nipples. Anyway, so what I was going to say is that like that sense, it seems like a little bit more silly this season around. And I think probably the landmark scene of that, the scene that kind of shows that, is that scene with Misty's self-deprivation tank experience, right? Now, I get that they're trying to do something different. They're trying to show like, okay, Misty's this kind of bonkers character. This is what she would envision. And I think it was actually well done, but it was like so jarring and so different from the rest of the show that I couldn't buy into it,
Listen, I totally get everything you're saying. But I love that scene. Because for me, that is, Misty is, more than any other character on the show, a really violent cartoon character. And that really does feel like what she would be envisioning in a what is it called? Deprivation tank? Or
yes, sensory deprivation tank. It basically turns off all your senses.
I was reminded of the movie Altered States.
Right.
And when that was John Cameron Mitchell, right?
The guy in there?
Yeah.
I don't know.
From Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Probably. I'll look him up real quick.
My sister said that she thought that was him.
Yes, that is. I just looked it up. It is.
When he is there as a human bird with the beak, smoking that cigar, I was hysterically laughing. And I don't know. Like, I felt like there are times where shows take a chance and do something that doesn't like go along with, uh, the show's
Your
momentum.
expectations.
Yeah, it like breaks expectations, breaks kind of like all the rules of that they have established, and does just something out there. And for me, this just worked. I don't know why. I do totally get where a viewer might look at this and go like, "What the fuck is happening?"
Right.
And if this was any other character, I'd probably be if Shauna went in there and Shauna had this type of vision, I'd be like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
But it just, first of all, I think again, it comes down to Christina Ricci is just having so much fun in this role. The look on her face when like the nothing is going on, she has this like wild, like happy but like kind of psychotic look. It made sense to me that is the those are the things that, like, because I went back to like the beginning of this season and even last season. She lives alone. She has her bird Caligula. She probably carries on full conversations with her bird in her normal life.
Right.
So it it makes sense that she would have this live conversation with a human bird smoking a cigar. And I don't know. I thought it was so well done and so trippy
Yeah.
that I genuinely liked that part. Um, and I thought that was needed in this episode because so much of the rest of the episode felt really heavy. Uh, Between the coach that and Samantha Henready as young Misty, her breakdown, like
Mm-hmm.
she's like, you can't jump. I'll say I'll tell everybody you're gay. We're gonna eat you. And
Right.
like she's saying all these terrible things, but she's trying to get him to not jump. And
Right.
then when she realizes he doesn't care, she just has a fucking meltdown.
Right.
I thought Shauna's scene with the goat was almost made me cry.
Yeah.
When I thought that was such a great scene because, Shauna was the one from probably last season that whenever they needed an animal killed, just call Shauna. She'll cut its throat. She'll bleed it out. No problem. And
Right.
now they're like, here, look after this cute little goat, Bruce. And her first thought is, don't give me this goat. You're just going to ask me to fucking kill it later.
Right.
And when she realizes that she won't have to do that, like that catharsis was like, whoa. Like it was like a real, after a couple episodes, and I love Melanie Linsky, but after a few episodes of like, oh,
Yeah.
Jeff and Callie and the
Yeah.
cops and
Right.
to see her like have that like emotional kind of breakdown, I was like, yeah, fucking Melanie Linsky's back. Let's go.
Well,
And
I agree with you there. I think, okay, when modern day Lottie gives everyone a task to do or they have to choose, right? Sherry was saying, she's like, I feel like most of these characters wouldn't accept these tasks. They would be like, I'm not doing this, right? And it felt kind of forced for each of them. It also kind of seemed like Van and Thais's tasks were sort of meaningless bullshit, like who cared, right? And then you had the little experience with Misty and the deprivation chamber, and then you have Shauna and the goat, right? But with that situation with the goat, it felt forced, but it felt like you got to that point where she admitted that she didn't want to care for her daughter based on what happened in the cabin. And that's good. That kind of ties things from the past and the present together really well, kind of explains a lot about her relationship with her daughter. I like that. And I did like that. I think Melanie Linsky's excellent in general. It just felt like kind of forced where she was talking about how like the goat ate the rope. And I mean, it looked perfectly fine. And that she's like listening to this guy in purple overalls saying like, I'm not going to take the goat. Like Sherry and I are just not fans of the modern day Lottie compound stuff. Like we just think it's kind of silly and
well, I
goofy.
think I kind of felt along those lines until, again, to me, another, like the moment with the therapist.
Yes, that was good. Yes.
Where that turned like the whole season on its head.
Right.
And you're like, oh, like that's
Yeah.
like a scream out loud moment where like she looks up and she sees the antler queen.
Right.
And then you realize she's not seeing a therapist.
Nope.
She's just fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit. Like, so now, and then that plays right into young Lottie telling Shauna, you need to get your anger out. And my sister said to me, and I like laughed at her, but she was like, oh my God. Like, she's like, I know Lottie is alive as an adult.
Yeah.
But I thought Shauna was going to kill her.
She seemed dead. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, that scene reminded me immediately of Fight Club.
Fight Club.
Yeah. And when
That's what we want to do to Jared Leto.
Yeah, Brad Pitt says to Edward Norton at the end, like, what the fuck is up with you?
Yeah.
And Edward Norton just says, I felt like destroying something beautiful.
Right.
And that's what that scene reminded me of. But then, like, that seems to be like the moment of catharsis in the past where, and I'm sure you watched the next week on Yellowjackets, because all of a sudden it's like cannibalism.
Yeah,
it's like next week, all of a sudden, Lottie's like, let's draw cards. One of you is getting fucking eaten.
Yeah.
And yeah, my sister said it seems like Marie, her time might be up next week.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that cynical chick. Yeah, I kind of feel like her talking about this episode with you. It's funny, like, our dynamic today is like the inverse of me and Brian. Because usually what happens is on mine and Brian's show on Comic Books Transformed, I'm like, hey, you know, this kind of sucked in Ant-Man. Didn't you think this was stupid in Ant-Man? And Brian's like, oh, it was okay. Like, if you think about this, it's better. And then on this show right now with you, it's like, Pete, I really liked this. The scene was great. And I'm like, all right, yeah, but this sucked over here, okay? Like, okay. So that scene with Lottie, let's just go fucking right into that scene with Lottie. That scene, I feel like, okay, it's like too much. The fact that she just beats the life out of her. Like, it's like too much. Like, it seems like A, she would have been dead by the way they beat her. But then B, it's like they're just sitting around watching her do it. I guess that's to show Lottie's power over the group, that they would let Shauna beat the shit out of her.
Sophie Thatcher has like, I was thinking the same thing. And then Sophie Thatcher, young Nat, has a lot, like, when she like gets up and walks outside, like Sophie Thatcher's just like, what the fuck? Like, like this, like, where like it almost felt like the group was like hypnotized. The way that Shauna says, she tells somebody, take Javi away, like take Javi upstairs or take Javi out of the room, like. So she knows what's going to happen. She's allowing this to happen. And it kind of feels like she's, without telling the group, let it happen. You know?
If that's like implying that maybe she might have some kind of control over them and maybe she'll have that in the present day, that's kind of exciting, right? But that sequence, the way that it was shot kind of bothered me too. Okay, now here's the thing. I actually really loved that Live song. I thought Live was amazing back in the day, like when we were teenagers. Then I watched this video by this guy, Pat Finnerty, who does this show called What Makes This Song Stink. And he did this whole thing on Live. And he was talking about how Live is kind of cheesy. He was saying they're kind of like more like a Nickelback type band or something like that. Sorry, Chris. But like it made me not like that song as much. And so what I didn't like about this scene was that they cut between this scene and the scene where the modern day people are dancing around and loving each other. And I get it. It's like juxtaposition. It's like, look, they're happy here. They're all getting along. And here she's beating her to death, right? But I feel like that scene would have been 800 times more disturbing and upsetting if you didn't have like a musical montage. Maybe you had like slow kind of music, the noise, right? Or no music at all. And maybe you don't even see her beating her, but you just see everyone's reactions while she's doing it. Like, I feel like that would be like way more chilling. And I think that like to have Shauna just beat Lottie to a pulp deserves that kind of scene. Like it should be like really like, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening. And I feel like it doesn't hit that beat because it's like cut to them, oh, I'm feeling like, you know, snow falling on them and shit. Like if it just was like just beat, maybe see some knuckles for a second, then like you see the fire and the fireplace. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. People in the comments, if you're watching this, who's side? Are you Team Danny or Team Pete? I'm guessing if you're Yellowjackets fans, you're probably more Team Danny today. But I don't know. Has the show jumped the shark for you?
I can totally see. You know what's funny? There was one moment of this episode that I felt forced.
Okay.
And the only thing that I felt was like added on, almost as like an afterthought, that kind of came out of nowhere, was Van has cancer.
Yeah.
Where it's like all of this is going on. You got this juxtaposition, and then you have like they kiss at the fire, and then she's like, but by the way, I have terminal cancer. And you're like, wait, what? Like that just came out of nowhere. And like I did like the follow-up where like Ty was like, why didn't you tell me? And she's like, what do you mean why didn't I tell you? We don't talk anymore.
Right.
Like what am I supposed to do? Like call my high school girlfriend and say, you know, I'm dying. Like you're married, you have a kid.
Right.
Which I still find hilarious that like Thaisa is an elected official who's married, her wife is in a coma, and she has a child who we don't know who's taking care of. And she gives her phone away and is at this compound now. So it's like her community has no elected official. Her son is in childcare and her wife is in a coma, and she's like making out with Van in front of the fire, dancing to lightning crashes.
Yes.
Yeah. So her story, I feel, has been maybe the most disappointing this year in the sense that it just doesn't feel like we've gotten any progression.
Yeah.
For Thaisa, like we got the progression of her second is back.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that Lottie is telling her, you know, it's part of you. Let her out. And like, so maybe we're going to see some like crazy Thaisa stuff in these last couple episodes where like her second or her other plays a huge role. Woo.
Yeah.
My cat's attacking me.
No, I agree with you. Van, oh my God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Sorry, she hooked me with her claw, you butt.
I agree with you that like the Van cancer thing is just kind of out of the blue, and she's like, I have months to live, even though I kind of seem normal and I'm dancing alive, but I have months to live, right? Like, okay, that's fine. I know people that have died of cancer and stuff, and that stuff always scares me. What I was gonna say about Lauren Ambrose and modern day Van, I read this article. It's kind of hard. You got to take everything with a grain of salt these days because, you know, like what's AI, what's fake, what's just clickbait. But they were saying that they were going to kill off Van, and Van wasn't going to make it to the present day on the show. The writers had that plan. And then they saw the actress or actor, they go by they, right, that plays young
Liv
Van.
Houston, yeah.
Right. They did this kind of improv thing during the Doom coming where they went to go do a speech, and they decided to top off their drink before they did it. And when the creators of the show saw that little improv, that made them laugh, and it reminded them of a friend that they had, and they're like, oh, Van's going to live to the present day. Because I've always felt like Van in the present day kind of didn't make a lot of sense. And Sherry and I were talking about this last night, too. It was like Misty seems so like manipulative and does so much research, and yet she never really mentions Van in that first season. And you'd think that like she would be going after Van right away in the first season, and there's nothing like that, right? And then all of a sudden, oh, Van's alive in this season. That's always felt a little weird. Good.
Yeah, I was gonna say it. I mean, obviously, she's like mauled by the wolves, and you know, half of the first season she's like wrapped up and you know being treated. So it also feels like, again, like if her and unless something happens to like completely separate them in the past, her and Thaisa coming home together to then just go their drastically separate ways felt. And there's also there was this throwaway line where Van, I think, mentions that she was at Shauna's wedding.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she does.
And that always struck me as, well, wait, was she, because Callie is 17 on the show, so that would have been, so figure her and Jeff got married 17, 18 years ago. Does that mean that were her and Thaisa together at that wedding and then they broke up and that's why she's been away for so long? Because it really wouldn't make sense if she was just randomly like single and running a video store and she showed up alone to the wedding.
I think that what you said, the first choice is the right choice. I think that her and Thaisa try to make it work when they first get back. And I do think that the show's got a 5-year plan, right? I'm guessing we're going to see like a sort of like Lost style, what happens after they return immediately.
I have a feeling it has to do with, maybe Thaisa sleepwalking and maybe she wants her to go back to Lottie because she's obviously, or Van is team Lottie in the past.
Right.
And maybe present Thaisa wants to completely separate herself. Obviously, they make mention that like when Lottie came home, she goes off to Switzerland to take part in like a mental institution type thing.
Yeah.
So who knows, like where that like divide happened.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like, does the other for Thaisa just stop at this point because of Lottie in 1996, and then the other doesn't come back until present day? Like, I don't know, or does the other come back other times too? But what's interesting about Van, I kind of wanted to tie this into the coach too. 2 other things I did like about this episode. I did like that young Van in 1996 was like, I almost died this time. I almost died that time. She almost died on the plane, right? She almost got burned to death on the plane. She got attacked by wolves. And she's thinking like, I'm wondering why I haven't died yet. Like there's some reason why I haven't died. I think that's a very interesting concept. And that's something interesting for the show to play with. And I have confidence in the writers that they will do that. Then the coach, on the other hand, he's so beaten down that when Misty's trying to manipulate him, she's saying, okay, I'm going to say that you impregnated this girl. I'm going to say you tried to impregnate me. I'm going to say you loved me. That doesn't even work on him. I thought it actually was going to work on him at first. But he's so beaten down by life that he's ready to die. And I think that that's a very, very interesting thread of like, when either the world seems like it's trying to kill you, like it seems like it's trying to kill Van, or like it's just too much for you and you want to kill yourself, like the coach, what's keeping you alive? And I think that's a really interesting part of this show.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see more of that moving forward. But I do think that it's interesting that, like, I think just like practical wise, they just kept Van around because the fans like Van so much too. That's the reason why. Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, I like Liv Houston from Santa Clarita Diet. So I was like really excited when they were in season 1.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that they kept Van around.
Yeah.
She does kind of feel like the 6th wheel.
Right.
Because we even called them the core 4 in the first season.
Right.
Then Lottie, which makes sense. Lottie makes sense as this like person who brings everybody together, the one who has the power kind of. But Van does kind of feel like if there is an extraneous member of this group, it does kind of feel like Van. Like her reintroduction to the show was basically an accident. Right. Like Thaisa ends up like sleepwalked to a highway where she starts what do you call it? Hitchhiking, like putting your thumb up. Yeah, she starts hitchhiking and she ends up at Van's store. Right. It's like it's completely kind of accidental to the plot of the rest of the show.
Right. Well, I feel like there was a bit more planning behind it, or that like it's more manipulated, because there's that part where Thaisa is looking in the mirror and talking with her other, and the other goes like this with her face, and I think that's supposed to be like Van's mask when Van had a mask in the past. So I think the other is saying like, "Hey, we're going to go to Van." But yeah, there's been issues, and here's the thing, and kind of wrapping it up because I know we got Mother's Day stuff to go do, is that the climax of the episode is Jeff calls Shauna and says, "Okay, well, I think they might have found Adam's remains," and I just let out this big sigh of like, I kind of don't give a fuck anymore. Like, let Shauna go to prison. Like, I don't care. Like, enough of this Adam shit.
Yeah, no, I've been this whole season, like Adam just feels like a plot thread that just feels like it felt really interesting in season 1, and now it just feels like a major distraction to like anything that is like really exciting going on in the show with any of the other characters. And then, oh, by the way, there's this Adam story.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, I was telling Sherry this. I was like, I really love this show. I'm really happy that we discovered it. I don't want to rag on it. Like, season 1 was so good. So for it to kind of reach points where I'm like, oh, why'd they do it that way?
But I think that like that is a problem with TV in general, where especially a show that is new, it gets hyped up really fast because it's new and it's very exciting. I mean, you know, again, to make the comparison, season 1 of Lost is one of the greatest seasons of TV I've ever watched.
Right.
And season 2 was so bad. And I know that there's a writer's strike involved, but for me, and I'm not talking to Lost fans because they're crazy, but season 2 for me was so bad that I walked into season 3 going, I'm gonna watch the first episode, and if I don't like it, I'm done. Yes. And I was out.
Right.
And it was only starting to date Athena, who is a full-fledged Lost apologist, that I ended up going back, and like I think when I started dating her, it was up to like season 5.
Yeah.
And so like she had seasons 3 and 4 on DVD, and I like rewatched seasons 3, 4, and 5 so that like we could watch season 6 and 7 when they were on.
Yes.
And like it just Lost never made it back to the quality of season 1.
Right.
And I think sometimes, you know, there's sophomore slumps. Sometimes there's just unreasonable fan expectations. I don't think this has been a bad season. Like we said at the beginning, you said every episode this season's been like a 6.5 or better. Yeah. To me, this was one of the better episodes of the season. Probably my favorite in terms of just there were so many scenes in this episode that I genuinely liked.
Yeah.
And very little, if anything, that I didn't like. Really, like the Van cancer disclosure was like the only thing that I kind of was like, that came out of nowhere.
Right.
And like even the Jeff phone call at the end, I was like, okay, well, that's the end of the episode. But then it was like next week on Yellowjackets, and it's like they're drawing cards and girls are screaming and running in the woods. And I'm like, yeah, here we go. Cannibalism. Let's go.
Right. I mean, it always seems more appealing on the next week on, you know, and even like this episode seemed like it was going to be kind of crazy and cool. But like, I agree with you. There are shows, though, that do get better with age. You know, I think like Star Trek The Next Generation, like the first 2 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation are really rough, but then it gets way better.
Buffy for me is the great example because season 1 of Buffy is fine, but it's very high school, very like my boyfriend, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And then as the characters got older and as the topics got more mature, that show just got better and better. And it legit built to one of the best final seasons.
Yeah.
And one of the best series finales of a show ever.
Right.
For me. You know, not to give Joss Whedon too much credit anymore. It's a shame. But yeah.
Right.
Thank God that nerd fandom has been able to replace Joss Whedon with James Gunn.
Right. Yes, thank God. Yeah. God damn it. Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe that's my problem too, is I saw Guardians of the Galaxy twice and then I'm watching this. I'm like,
not to get off on a tangent, but I just rewatched Guardians 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I saw Guardians 3. I absolutely fucking loved it. I'm going to see Guardians 3 again probably today. And I don't even think it's close for me anymore, that it is the best contained MCU trilogy. And, I said to you, when I watch Guardians 2, it's the movie where it depends every time I watch it. It moves up and down my list.
Yeah.
This time I watched it, fucking loved it again. And I think it's also the idea that you see the character arcs are so clear for every character from beginning to end. It's really amazing. It really amazing job that James Gunn did. And he's going to actually make me care about DC movies now, because I haven't really since Christopher Nolan, probably.
Holy shit, that's a while. It's like 2010 or something like that.
I mean, there have been some fun DC movies, but just overall, I haven't even, I didn't see Black Adam. I didn't see Shazam 2.
Yeah.
So like Aquaman was fine.
Yeah.
There was an octopus playing the drums in that movie.
Well, that's because it was James Wan, and how much you love James Wan. But you know what, guys? That's a good segue from my other channel, Comic Books Transformed.
Yes.
I could always use some more views over there. If you want to hear me talk about comics in a cynical way that I'm talking about Yellowjackets right now. Brian and I just did all 3 Guardians movies over on our channel. But on this channel, Danny's always popping out shorts, and there's content like 3 or 4 times a week. He and I always review Yellowjackets. What you got?
I am going to be putting up a review a little bit later, short review of the Full Moon Subspecies franchise, which is one of the better underseen Full Moon franchises, because tomorrow night, we're recording on Sunday, Mother's Day. Tomorrow night, I'm going to Alamo Drafthouse. Subspecies 5 is having a theatrical release. Ted Niccolo, the director, has a pre-recorded interview that they're gonna play towards the end. I'm a big fan of this franchise. It's one of those where the director and the lead actor have remained the same throughout the entire franchise. So even though some of the later sequels aren't great, it has a continuity that I enjoy. For those of you who like schlocky full moon horror, Charles Band full moon features, I'll have a review of the Subspecies movies coming up a little bit later today. And then tomorrow, I'll probably have a short review up when I get home from the theater of Subspecies 5.
Nice. Oh my God. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, obviously Danny really loves the stuff. He's got a passion for horror. We do on the Lasser cast, and we'll have new stuff coming up. We have 2 more episodes of Yellowjackets to go, before it's all over. So let us know what you thought about this recent episode. Was it a thumbs up, a thumbs down? What would you give it out of a score of 10? All right. Well, we will see you guys. Happy Mother's Day, and may the wilderness